Imagine a fortress, not of stone and steel, but of influence and perception. A place that for years symbolized unchecked power, a hub where decisions were whispered, allegiances formed, and the very course of a nation seemed to bend to its will. Now, picture that same fortress, its gates still standing, its walls seemingly intact, yet the power within is subtly, irrevocably diminished. The guards are still there, the flags still wave, but the authority that once emanated from its polished corridors has begun to dissipate, not with a bang, but with a quiet, unsettling shift. This isn't about a public defeat or a dramatic overthrow. It's about the silent erosion of command, the slow, almost imperceptible fading of a magnetic pull. What if the true loss of control isn't a spectacle, but an absence, a growing silence where once there was a roar? We're talking about Mar-a-Lago, but not just as a property. For years, this sprawling estate in Florida transcended its gilded gates to become a veritable extension of presidential power. A shadow White House, a crucible where political destiny was forged. It was a place of pilgrimage for the ambitious, a stage for the powerful, and a symbol of a particular brand of authority. But what if this symbol, this epicenter of influence, is no longer fully under the control of its most famous resident? We're not here to discuss a legal battle or an election outcome. We're going to explore how control can be reduced, not by direct attack, but by 1,000 tiny limitations, by the shifting sands of access and perception. The real question isn't whether Mar-a-Lago still exists, but who now truly sets its limits, and by extension, the limits of the power it once projected. This isn't merely an academic exercise, it matters profoundly right now. In an era where information spreads instantly and perceptions are reality, symbolic power translates directly into real-world political leverage. When a figure like Donald Trump, whose entire brand is built on an image of absolute control and unwavering authority, sees one of his most potent symbols begin to falter, the ripple effects are significant. The ability to command attention, to dictate terms, to rally support, all these rely on the perception of unassailable power. When that perception starts to crack, even subtly, it signals a vulnerability that adversaries are quick to exploit, and allies begin to reconsider. The timing is crucial. In a highly polarized environment, every shift in the balance of power, however quiet, has outsized consequences, making this moment uniquely different from past controversies that Mar-a-Lago has weathered. Mar-a-Lago's transformation into a power hub began long before Trump's presidency. Acquired in the 1980s, it was meticulously restored and later converted into a private club. But it was during his time in office, and especially after, that it truly became a political nerve center. Here, world leaders were entertained, cabinet appointments discussed, and policy debated. Its opulent setting, coupled with the constant presence of the former president, created an aura of exclusivity and direct access. Loyalty was rewarded with invitations, and visibility at Mar-a-Lago became a de facto endorsement of one's political standing. This wasn't merely a resort. It was a stage where the drama of American power played out, reinforcing Trump's control through a carefully curated ecosystem of access, influence, and unwavering fealty. It became synonymous with his personal brand of leadership, an extension of his will. However, the conventional wisdom dictates that power is lost dramatically through a decisive election loss, a scathing court ruling, or a public scandal. But what if the erosion of control is far more insidious? Imagine a dam, not bursting, but slowly seeping. The water level drops, imperceptibly at first, then undeniably. Mar-a-Lago's situation is evolving in a similar fashion. The loss of control isn't manifesting as a direct assault on the property itself, but through a series of accumulating restrictions, limitations, and an increasing isolation of the influence it once commanded. Nothing dramatic needs to happen on the nightly news for the balance of power to shift. It's the tightening of invisible cords, the quiet closing of previously open doors, and the gradual redefinition of what is permissible within its once boundless sphere of influence. This is a subtle, yet profound, reining in. This nuanced shift highlights a critical truth about modern authority. It's less about absolute ownership and more about access, coordination, and perception. When Mar-a-Lago functioned as a political epicenter, It was because it facilitated unhindered access to a central figure, enabling direct coordination among key players and projecting an image of unquestionable power. Now, as external constraints tighten, that access becomes less direct, coordination more cumbersome, and the perception of invincibility begins to fray. Consider the impact of security protocols, legal proceedings, or even just the subtle shift in who feels comfortable being seen there. Each new barrier, each forced detour, acts like a tiny but persistent drain on the reservoir of influence. The cause and effect is clear. External limitations lead directly to internal erosion of control. It's not about a physical siege, but a strategic one. If key figures find it increasingly difficult or politically risky to convene there, if sensitive discussions require relocating to less scrutinized venues, or if the sheer logistical burden of operating under heightened scrutiny becomes too great, the center of gravity inevitably shifts. Regaining that lost leverage is exceptionally difficult because it's built on a foundation of trust, convenience, and an unwritten understanding of unspoken rules. Once those elements are fractured, piecing them back together is a monumental task, often requiring more effort than the initial accumulation of power. The very nature of its past strength, its openness and accessibility, now becomes a vulnerability, as those same avenues are used to impose limitations. As Mar-a-Lago's control narrows, other entities inevitably gain leverage. Prosecutors, regulatory bodies, and even political adversaries find their positions strengthened. They don't need to conquer the property. They simply need to circumscribe its functions and the activities that occur within it. The immediate impact is a reduction in the former president's unconstrained operational space. Decisions that were once made with swift private consultations now require more careful consideration of legal implications, public optics, and the potential for external interference. This isn't just about legal battles. It's about the ability to convene, strategize, and project a unified front without external pressures. In the medium term, this diminishes options, forcing a more reactive rather than proactive stance. The psychological toll of constantly navigating limitations rather than freely dictating terms is immense, increasing tension and narrowing strategic pathways available to those operating within its orbit. This phenomenon extends far beyond the gates of Mar-a-Lago, revealing a broader pattern of power erosion in the modern age. It challenges the traditional understanding that authority crumbles only under direct public assault. Instead, we are witnessing how modern authority, particularly that rooted in personal charisma and symbolic real estate, can be systematically constrained through 1,000 cuts. This isn't a fall from grace in the dramatic sense, but a slow, almost imperceptible unwinding of the threads that bind influence to a specific location and persona. It reframes the fall not as a personal failure or a single catastrophic event, but as a systemic consequence of evolving legal, political, and social landscapes that are less tolerant of unbridled private power. The very mechanisms that once amplified control are now being repurposed to contain it. What most people miss in this unfolding narrative is precisely why symbols often fall before the structures they represent completely collapse. The perceived control, the public image of an unassailable fortress, frequently lags behind the real internal loss of command. For a time, the outward appearance remains, creating an illusion of continuity. But behind the scenes, the vital arteries of influence are being constricted. This is because power doesn't always break with a bang. Sometimes it simply fades quietly, until one day, the symbol that once commanded obedience finds itself merely a gilded cage, its residents no longer able to dictate terms, but rather subject to them. This insight reveals that the true weakening of power often occurs in the shadows, long before the public is aware that the king's reach no longer extends as far as it once did. The process is subtle, but its effects are profound. This process is subtle, but its effects are profound. We are conditioned to expect power's demise to be loud, dramatic, a public spectacle of defeat. Yet, the erosion happening within Mar-a-Lago, and indeed within broader spheres of influence, demonstrates a more insidious, almost silent form of decline. It's a process where the perception of control is maintained for as long as possible, masking the gradual decay of actual authority. The public still sees the grand estate, the familiar imagery, the trappings of past power, but fails to recognize that the gears have jammed. The levers no longer respond with the same force. This disjunction between the perceived and the real is critical. It allows the powerful to project an image of strength while their actual capacity to act, to influence and to command is slowly being siphoned away. The quiet nature of this decline makes it particularly difficult to grasp, as there's no singular event to point to, no definitive battle lost. Instead, it's a confluence of minor restrictions, legal maneuvers, and shifting public sentiment that collectively form an invisible wall around what was once an open field of action. The insight here is that power often weakens quietly before it breaks publicly. It's like a grand old tree whose roots are slowly being eaten away by unseen fungi. From the outside, the canopy remains lush, the trunk appears strong. But beneath the surface, the lifeblood is draining, making it vulnerable to the slightest storm. Similarly, the mechanisms that once amplified the former president's influence from Mar-a-Lago, the constant flow of visitors, the media attention, the unquestioning loyalty, are now being constrained. Access is becoming more regulated, legal challenges are demanding more resources and attention, and the political landscape is shifting, reducing the club's magnetic pull. The quiet dismantling of these mechanisms means that the symbol of power, Mar-a-Lago itself, acts less as a launchpad for action and more as a contained environment where every move is scrutinized, every guest noted, and every decision weighed against a growing list of external pressures. This is not about a sudden loss, but about a gradual tightening of the leash, reducing the range of motion until the once dominant figure finds themselves operating within increasingly narrow confines. The question that lingers, then, is whether this loss of control is reversible. Can the threads of influence, once unraveled, be rewoven? Or is this a permanent recalibration of power dynamics, not just for an individual, but for a certain type of political operation? The answer remains an open loop, a narrative still unfolding. What is clear is that the next significant shift in this saga may not announce itself with fanfare. It might be another quiet restriction, another subtle reinterpretation of rules, another legal precedent that further limits the once unbound. The danger for those accustomed to wielding unfettered power is that they might not even recognize the moment when the symbolic power they rely on ceases to command obedience, when the gilded cage truly becomes a prison of their own making. When symbols no longer command obedience, their utility vanishes, leaving behind only an ornate structure bereft of its former vitality. The true measure of power in this modern era may no longer be found in grand declarations, but in the subtle, often invisible constraints that define its new boundaries. The quiet erosion of Mar-a-Lago's unbridled influence serves as a compelling case study, revealing how the mighty can be diminished, not by direct confrontation, but by the slow, relentless tightening of the ropes that bind even the most formidable figures.